I've got a few things on my list that I want to go through with you, things that have come up in client sessions, my tips and guidance that I hope will help you feel more confident when you're out there in the workplace communicating in English. Let's crack on, shall we? Welcome back to Confident Business English. If you're a senior manager, you work in an international company and you already have to use English at work, but you lack confidence in certain situations, this podcast is for you. With each episode, I hope to help you build your confidence step by step, focusing on the problems that you actually face out there in the workplace. If you find these episodes really useful, I would really appreciate it if you could like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And even better, you could recommend it to somebody who you think could also really benefit from this as well. Right, let's get on with it. If this is your first Anna's Key Takeaways episode, all it is that as a coach working with senior managers on their English communication, I've got a little notepad. I like to write things down. I've got a Google document where I like to write in things that have come up in the sessions or things that I see people are having problems with. And they might be a little bit too short to have on a longer episode, but they're perfect for now. So I go through a few topics in the episode, but all super relevant for you. First thing on my list is actually a recommendation. Do you have to make conversation with people? Maybe it's dinners, lunches, in the corridor, in the coffee room, and you want to have a few more talking points. One of the things that I do in Spanish that I found works really well for me is listening every single day to a news podcast. Honestly, I think it's really made a difference to how I've been able to connect into conversations. I've been able to follow more what people are talking about and then offer a question or an opinion about it. And I found it really useful. This is why I want to recommend to you another great podcast which helps you improve your English while staying up to date with world news. Simple English News Daily tells you the most important news stories from everywhere. And there's always at least 2 stories from each continent, which I think is great. So you get to know what's happening all over the world. Best of all, because I know that you like things that are short and sweet, it's only 7 minutes long and it's released Monday to Friday. If you want to find out more, just go to send7.org. I'll put the link down below in the description box, or you can search in your favorite podcast app for Simple English News Daily. Next, this is a super short one. Make sure that you have good audio in online meetings. I was in a meeting with a client the other day, and it was like night and day. They were in the office, which isn't their usual setup. They're normally at home when we have the session, and I hear them fine. Everything's super clear. But this day they were in the office, and they were using some of the headsets that they have in the office. And I said, I'm really sorry, but I honestly am finding it very hard to understand you because of the audio quality. Nothing to do with what they were saying, but the headphones were really bad. So what I would recommend is if you ever have an important meeting, especially, but just for online meetings as well, I really recommend either investing in a good pair of headphones or a headset where people can hear you clearly. This benefits you because, first of all, you're going to be able to hear people more clearly, but also they're going to be able to hear you. And that might avoid some of these situations where people are like, sorry, what? Can you say that again? Sometimes it can be to do with the audio quality. Moving on, let's talk about pronunciation. And this is a sound that I correct quite often, especially for Spanish speakers, but you might find it relevant for you in your language as well. And this is for words like culture, customer. This has a short vowel sound. And I actually call this, it's a nickname, but I call it the cup vowel because it's got the same sound as in the word, cup. What's the issue here? A lot of the time, people will say things like culture, customer, that ooh. This vowel, however, is not a rounded vowel. And it's not a long vowel. It's a short vowel, it's relaxed, and it's very central. So it's customer, culture, not culture. If you're rounding your lips and you're saying culture, that's the incorrect mouth position. Very central, coming from towards the back of the mouth, no rounded lips, and your jaw drops a little bit. Customer, culture, current, summarize, summary, bug. If you go into the phonetic symbols, it's the upside down V, essentially. If you ever have any doubts about the word, you can go in and look at the phonetics, and that's really, really useful. But key point is, if it's the cup vowel, there's no rounding of the lips. Next, let's move on and talk about answering difficult questions under pressure. The inspiration for this came from one of my clients who has to have regular meetings with the team from head office. They're based in a different country than them. And they get this kind of bombardment of questions. Why are things not performing well? Why are things not on track? Explain that to me. Why is this? Why is that? And they end up having to explain a lot of things. And one of their concerns was, how can I do this in a calmer way? How can I make sure that I'm being clear with the answer? One thing that we've been looking at, which you might find useful, is to follow a framework in your answers. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know that I'm a fan of following frameworks for non-native speakers of English in an executive context. Why? Because it makes your life easier. It's already more challenging because you're communicating in a language that's not your own. So let's try and help you structure things so at least one thing is off your plate. The framework that we've been looking at for answering difficult questions is RCA. Results, cause, action. First, state the result clearly. Second, explain the key drivers. And third, outline the next steps. Let's imagine a situation where you work as a senior manager in a retail company and you have to explain why revenue did not meet expectations. You get a question like, why was the revenue below the forecast this quarter? Your answer using the framework could look like this. Thank you for your question. As stated previously, the revenue was below the forecast last quarter. This was primarily due to the weaker footfall that we experienced and also the delays in some of the promotional activity. In response to that, we are planning to adjust the pricing strategy a little bit and also increase marketing spend in the local area. Moving on, let's look at a different point here, and I want to touch on vocabulary. I have a client who works in the field of contract management. When we first started working together, they could communicate absolutely fine, but it's true that there were some precise vocabulary that they were missing that was going to help them express themselves in a way that was much more accurate in their specific context. You might work in these kind of technical fields as well, or within contract management or negotiation. And I'm going to share with you some phrases that you might be able to use to talk about accepting, rejecting proposals, but also agreeing to look at things as well. In the previous session, we were trying to come up with some set phrases that this client could go back to and use when they were having these, which can be at times difficult negotiations. We're going to have a look at some passive voice structures here. As a person who works in contract management, they have to decide what the position is. Do we say yes? Do we say no? Or are we open to looking into more details? Here are some of the phrases that we came up with that you may also find useful. Let's have a look at some of the phrases with yes. Yes, this can be accepted. Yes, this can be negotiated. Yes, this can be included. It is possible to proceed on this basis. If we were going for something in the middle, we could say, yes, we are willing to discuss this further as long as, and then you can add in your condition. Or it could be, yes, we are open to looking at this in more detail on the condition that. Finally, at some points, this client also has to just be like, it's a no, right? It's a non-negotiable. And this is a nice phrase that we used as well, but we can also use here the passive voice. And we're going to use here cannot, because cannot is stronger than just saying can't. This cannot be negotiated. This cannot be accepted. It cannot be included. Unfortunately, it's not possible to proceed on this basis. I'd also say as well, one of the things we looked at in this specific session, because this was a type of meeting where there's lots of people around the room, they have a document and they have to go through the document and guide people through the conversation, was just making sure that they always had some of these transition phrases. Exactly like I'm using in the podcast. Okay, next, moving on, next, now let's have a look at this. These types of transition phrases are essential when you are guiding and leading people through meetings as well. So highly recommend that you at least use next to guide people to where you are going. Finally, I want to wrap it up on a really positive note. I've been really proud of my clients recently for their progress and also their openness to saying yes to challenging opportunities that are going to push them to do things that they're not used to doing in English. And even though they're scary and they're a little bit nervous, it's been great to see some of them go for that and accept the challenge. That is exactly what I would ask you to do. It doesn't need to be anything big. It could be just something like accepting a coffee or speaking to somebody a little bit longer than usual. But what could you say yes to? What could you do that might push you a little bit to take a step to do something in English that you haven't done previously? This for me actually is one of the biggest signs of more confidence, is when clients say yes more and they also don't think about it as much. It doesn't cause so much mental anxiety thinking about giving a presentation, for example. It's also just the way that you feel. If you're really anxious and you're really nervous all the time, kind of a more peaceful state of mind when you're communicating, not spending kind of hours preparing. There's also the time factor as well, because you're like, okay, I'm going to prepare, but I don't need to over prepare. I know what I'm going to say. I'm going to follow this routine that I have, and I'm going to be fine. And of course, the big one, which is contributing more and participating. I was having a chat to a client today who at the beginning was really keen to be more visible at the executive level, not hold back when they had something to say. And they really did feel like at the moment they were not thinking before they had to share something. So it wasn't a case of like, I don't know, whatever. I'm sure you've had that thought in the back of your mind as well. It's just like, okay, I'm going to go for it. I've got something to say and I'm going to go for it. So I will repeat that question from before. What opportunity could you say yes to that is in English that you haven't done before? All right, let's wrap it up. If you would like to have a written summary of the points I've talked about in this episode, as well as tips I don't include on the podcast, you can sign up to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the description box below. Thank you, as always, for squeezing in some of your precious free time to get your training here on Confident Business English. I hope there was something that you could take away from the episode today. See you same time, same place next week.